A billionaire heiress crashed into his old truck. She didn't know he held her father's last secret. The German engine whined, a sound of expensive protest against the indignity of mud. Elara Vance felt a similar protest rising in her own throat. The sedan, a machine designed for the autobahn, was thoroughly, hopelessly mired in a rut of brown Virginia clay. It was an absurd predicament. A symbol, perhaps, of her entire trip. She was a creature of glass towers and quarterly reports, marooned in a world of dirt and inconvenient silence. She pressed the accelerator again, a futile gesture. The tires spun, flinging thick arcs of mud against the pristine silver paint. Each splatter felt like a personal insult. She had a 10 o'clock meeting. A simple land acquisition. The final piece of a portfolio her father had begun assembling years ago. It should have taken an hour. Sign the papers, transfer the funds, fly back to the city where things made sense. Instead, she was stuck. Her phone had no signal. Of course it had no signal. The very air here felt technologically barren, thick with the scent of damp earth and pine. She had dismissed the warnings from her assistant. Anya, a four-wheel drive would have been prudent, Anya had suggested. Elara had scoffed. Prudence was for the unprepared. She was never unprepared. A sound broke the quiet. The low grumble of an old engine, steady and unimpressed. A truck, faded to a color that might once have been blue, crested the small hill. It slowed, then stopped. A man got out. He wore work boots, jeans worn pale at the knees, and a plain gray shirt. He moved with an economy of motion she associated with people who worked with their hands, people for whom time was measured in daylight, not billable hours. He walked to the edge of the road and looked down at her car. He did not seem surprised. He did not seem anything at all. His expression was a flat, neutral landscape. Elara powered down her window. The air that drifted in was cool and clean. It felt alien. She composed her face into the mask of polite authority she used for recalcitrant contractors and junior executives. "Can you help me?" she asked. The words sounded brittle, out of place. The man looked from her car to her face. His eyes were a pale, clear gray, the color of a winter sky. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Looks like you found some trouble." "I have a meeting," she said. The statement clipped, "With a Mr. Thorne, Caleb Thorne." The man's expression did not change, but a stillness settled over him. A subtle shift. On Caleb Thorne, of course he was. The universe in Elara's experience had a penchant for dry, situational irony. This was the man holding up a multi-million-dollar consolidation project. This man, who looked as if he had been carved from the very woods surrounding them. She felt a flicker of annoyance. She had expected someone different. Someone she could manage. She managed people for a living. It was her primary skill. She assessed their weaknesses, their desires, their price, and she constructed a deal that served her objectives. This man presented no data. He was a closed system. He walked back to his truck and returned with a heavy chain. The links clanked against the gravel of the road. He knelt, his movements sure and practiced, and began attaching the hook to the undercarriage of her car. He did not ask for permission. He simply did what needed to be done. The efficiency was grudgingly impressive. She remained in the car, a silent queen in a metal throne, as he worked. It was a position she was accustomed to, yet it felt wrong here. She was not in control. The mud was in control. He was in control. He returned to his truck and climbed in. A moment later, the chain went taut with a loud groan of stressed metal. Her car lurched, then began to slide backward, pulled from the clay's grip. He towed it onto the solid gravel of his own driveway. Without ceremony, Elara got out. The silver sedan was now decorated in a Jackson Pollock of mud. She surveyed the damage to her dignity. She opened her purse, her movements crisp and transactional. "Thank you," she said. "What do I owe you for your time?" Caleb Thorne looked at the bill she held out. He did not look at her. He looked at the money as if it were a foreign object, something he couldn't quite identify. "You don't owe me anything. Land doesn't rush. People forget that." He turned to walk toward the simple, well-kept farmhouse that stood a few hundred yards away. "Wait," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "The letter. My office was informed you had a letter for me." He stopped. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans and pulled out a creased, white envelope. It was sealed. Her name was written on the front in a familiar, elegant script. It was her father's handwriting. Her breath caught. Her father had been dead for over a year. His estate was settled, his affairs meticulously closed. She had overseen it herself. There were no loose ends. There were never any loose ends. She took the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind he had always used. Her hand closed around it hard enough to crease the edge. Caleb Thorne watched her. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes beyond that flat, neutral calm. It was not pity, it was something closer to recognition, as if he knew exactly what that letter contained and what it would do to her carefully ordered world. "The business with the land can wait," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a verdict. "You should read that first." Then he turned and walked toward his house, leaving her standing in his driveway, next to her soiled, useless car, holding a ghost in her hand. She retreated to the driver's seat. The smell of rich leather and imported air freshener was a comfort, a small pocket of her world. She stared at the envelope. Her name, Elara, written by a hand that was now dust. Her fingers, usually so steady, trembled as she broke the seal. The letter was a single page. The ink was dark blue, the letters precise. "My dearest Elara," it began. "Kay!" If you are reading this, it means a man named Caleb Thorne has decided you are ready to hear the truth. I have left a great weight on him and on his family, a weight that belongs to me, to our company. Ethel Corp was meant to build things, not break them. I forgot that for a time. I let ambition blind me to the cost. The cost was a woman named Elena Thorne. A good woman, a brilliant woman. I failed her. The company failed her. I ask that you, my daughter, do what I was too cowardly to do. Listen to her husband. Right this wrong. It is the only legacy that matters now. The words blurred. Elena Thorne. His wife. A debt, a mistake. The clinical, sterile language of business could not contain the meaning. This was not a negotiation. It was a confession. Her father, the titan of industry, the man who saw the world as a series of assets to be acquired and liabilities to be managed, had been carrying this. A secret, heavy enough to confess from beyond the grave. She read the letter again. And again the paper grew warm in her hands. The corporate machinery she commanded, the empire she had inherited and expanded, was built on a foundation she did not recognize. A crack ran through it. A crack named Elena Thorne. A small movement caught her eye. A child stood on the porch of the farmhouse. A girl, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, with dark, serious eyes and hair the color of corn silk. She held a sketchbook and a pencil. She was not staring at Elara. She was staring at the creek that ran alongside the property, her focus absolute. The girl looked up, as if sensing Elara's gaze. Their eyes met across the expanse of the lawn. The child offered no smile, no wave, just a steady, unblinking look. Then she turned a page in her sketchbook and began to draw. This was his family, the family her father had wronged. Elara folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. The land acquisition was no longer a simple transaction. It was an obligation, a reckoning. She got out of the car and walked toward the house. Her heels sank into the soft grass. It was like walking on a foreign planet. Caleb Thorne was on the porch, repairing a small wooden chair. His hands moved with a craftsman's certainty. He looked up as she approached. He did not seem surprised to see her. "I need to understand," she said. He set down his tool, a small, polished block plane. He gestured to another chair, one that was not in pieces. The girl on the steps did not look up from her drawing. "My wife, Elena," he began, his voice low and even, as if recounting a chapter from a history book. "She was an environmental scientist, the best I ever knew. She saw things other people missed. Most people only see what's flowering. They miss what's moving underneath." He paused, his gaze drifting to the line of trees at the edge of the property. "She was working on a water table analysis for this whole region, pro bono. She loved this land. She believed it was a trust, not a commodity." Elara remained silent. She was a guest here, in every sense of the word, a trespasser on his grief. "She found something," he continued. "Ethel Corp's preliminary surveys for this area were incomplete. Deliberately so. They omitted the presence of certain geological formations that would make mineral extraction with cheap chemicals catastrophic for the aquifer. It wouldn't just poison this creek, it would poison the water for 100 miles downstream. Her father's company. Her company." The name felt like ash in her mouth. Elena was preparing a report. She intended to file an injunction. She believed in the system. She believed if people knew the truth, they would do the right thing. His hands rested on the unfinished chair. Strong hands? Capable. Now still. "She died before she could file it. A car accident. On a rainy night, the official report said she lost control." He said the words without inflection, but Elara could feel the immense, compressed weight behind them. 5 years of grief and suspicion honed to a fine, sharp edge. The little girl on the steps finally looked up. She tore a page from her sketchbook, walked over and held it out to Elara. Elara took it. It was a drawing of the creek. Not just a child's scribble, but a careful rendering of the way the water moved around the rocks. The lines were confident, observant. The girl had her mother's eye. "Thank you," Elara said. The girl gave a small, solemn nod and returned to her spot. The simple, unasked-for gift was a fissure in the armor Elara had worn for years, a moment of pure human connection in a situation defined by contracts and loss. She looked at Caleb. "I didn't know your father knew," he said, his voice devoid of accusation. It was simply a statement of fact. He knew what a junior executive on his team was planning. He chose to look away. I think it haunted him. That letter is his ghost, the junior executive. The name hung in the air unsaid. Elara knew, with a sudden cold certainty, who it was. The one person who had been pushing for this land acquisition with an almost feverish intensity. Julian Croft. She needed to think. She needed information. She needed to be back in her world. Even if just for a moment. "I can't go back to the city tonight. Is there a hotel nearby?" "There's an inn in town," he said. She nodded, standing up. The drawing felt warm in her hand. "I'll be back tomorrow. We need to talk more." He just nodded, picking up his block plane again. The conversation was over. At the small, clean inn, Elara finally had a signal. She called Anya. Her voice was low, controlled. "I need everything you can find on Caleb Thorne, not the public record. I need the real story. And cross-reference Ethel Corp's internal memos from 5 years ago. Project name Stone Creek. I want to know everyone who touched it, especially Julian Croft. Dig deep." Anya. Deeper than usual. Anya, unflappable as ever, simply said, "It will be on your encrypted server by morning." Elara hung up. She looked at the child's drawing she had placed on the nightstand. The creek flowed across the page, indifferent to the machinations of men. For the first time in a very long time, Elara felt profoundly, terrifyingly adrift. The maps she had used to navigate her life no longer showed the correct terrain. The next morning, the report from Anya was waiting. It was a concise, brutal document. Caleb Thorne had not been a farmer. He had been a senior risk analyst for a top-tier investment firm. A legend in the industry, known for his almost prophetic ability to see structural weaknesses in complex systems. His colleagues had called him Cassandra, because his warnings were always right and always ignored until it was too late. He had resigned without explanation the day after his wife's funeral and vanished. The second file contained the Ethel Corp memos. Julian Croft's name was everywhere. He had been the project lead on the Stone Creek acquisition. He had commissioned the geological surveys. He had signed off on the environmental impact assessment, the same one Elena Thorne had found to be fraudulent. He had personally recommended shelving the project 5 years ago, citing local resistance. Now, he was the one championing its revival. It was a neat, tidy circle of deceit. Her phone rang. It was Julian. His voice was smooth, polished, a finely crafted tool of corporate persuasion. "Elara, how is our rustic adventure going? Have you convinced a farmer to sell his patch of dirt yet?" She kept her own voice cool, level. "I'm making progress. Mr. Thorne is deliberate." "Deliberate doesn't move the needle on the quarterly earnings," Julian purred. "There's a new mineralogical report. Seems that patch of dirt is sitting on one of the richest lithium deposits on the East Coast. The board is very excited. They see this as your first major test as CEO. Don't fumble it." He hung up. The threat was veiled but unmistakable. The discovery of lithium explained his sudden, intense interest. It raised the stakes from millions to billions, and it made Elena Thorne's findings infinitely more dangerous to him. Elara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. She had inherited not just a company, but a conspiracy. Julian wasn't just a rival. He was a predator who had been waiting patiently for his moment, and she was standing in his way. She drove back to the Thorne property. The muddy sedan felt like a relic from another life. A life of boardrooms and stock prices. A life where people were assets and liabilities. Caleb was mending a fence along the perimeter of his property. The work was slow, methodical. He replaced an old post, his movements economical and precise. His daughter Lily sat on the grass nearby, organizing a collection of smooth, gray stones. Elara got out of the car and walked toward them. She held the file from Anya in her hand. "I know who you were," she said without preamble. "I know about your wife's research, and I know Julian Croft was the one who buried it." Caleb stopped working. He turned to face her. "Mundra." The ever-present calm in his eyes was gone, replaced by a guarded, watchful intensity. He had been waiting 5 years for this conversation. "What are you going to do about it?" he asked. The question was the crux of everything. She could walk away. She could approve the sale, collect her victory, and let Julian have his prize. The board would praise her. The stock would soar. It would be the smart, profitable move. The move her father would have made 5 years ago. Or she could do what her father had asked. She could right the wrong. "I'm going to stop him," she said. The words felt solid, real. The first real thing she had said in years. Caleb studied her face, searching for the fine print, the hidden clauses. He found none. He gave a single slow nod. "Then you'll need more than memos. You'll need her work." He told her about Martha Gable, the town librarian. A woman who had been Elena's close friend and confidant before Elena had driven to the city to meet with her lawyers. She had left a package with Martha. Insurance, she had called it. Caleb had never asked for it. He had not been ready to face it. He had retreated into his grief, into his quiet life, building fences against the world. That night, as a storm rolled in, the power at the inn flickered and died. Elara sat in the dark, the silence absolute. A sharp noise from the parking lot made her jump, the unmistakable hiss of a deflating tire. She didn't need to look. She knew. It was a message from Julian's world, a crude but effective reminder that she was an outsider, here, vulnerable. He was telling her, he was watching, he was telling her to back down. The fear was cold and sharp, but something else rose to meet it, a hard, defiant anger. This was no longer about her father's legacy or a corporate conspiracy. It was a choice between the person she had been and the person she was becoming. She packed a small bag. She left the useless car and walked out of the inn into the rain. The half-mile walk to Caleb's farm felt longer in the dark. The road was slick with mud. By the time she saw the warm yellow light of his house, she was soaked through. He opened the door before she knocked. He took in her wet clothes, her determined expression, and simply stepped aside. "The guest cabin is ready," he said. "The generator is running. You're safer here." It was not an act of charity. It was an act of alliance. The guest cabin was small, just one room, with a bed, a desk, and a wood-burning stove. It was clean, Spartan, and solid. It felt like the safest place on earth. Through the window she could see the light in the main house. She could see the silhouette of Caleb reading a book to his daughter. A small, fiercely protected world. The next day, they went to see Martha Gable. The library was the oldest building in town, a stone structure that smelled of old paper and wood smoke. Martha was a woman in her 70s, with eyes that had seen the town through floods and festivals. They held a deep, quiet wisdom. Caleb made the introductions. "Elara Vance," he said. "She's here to help." Martha studied Elara, her gaze missing nothing. She had the measure of Elara's expensive shoes, her tailored coat, and a new, uncertain resolve in her eyes. She finally gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Elena was a special girl," Martha said, her voice raspy with age. "She saw the world as a living thing. She said some people looked at a river and saw a resource, but she saw a circulatory system. She told me, if anything ever happened to her, I was to hold on to a package for her husband, but only when he was ready to use it. Are you ready, Caleb?" Caleb looked at Elara, then back at the old woman. "We are," he said. Martha disappeared into a back room. The silence was thick with anticipation. She returned with a small metal lockbox. It was dented and old. She handed the key to Caleb. He opened it. Inside, nestled in yellowing cloth, was a USB drive and a slim, leather-bound notebook. Elena's handwriting filled the pages. It was a meticulous record of her research dates, times, water sample results, geological data, and on the last few pages a detailed summary of her conversations with a young, ambitious executive from Ethel Corp. An executive who had first tried to bribe her, then subtly threatened her. Julian Croft. It was the smoking gun. Back in the cabin, Elara felt a surge of her old self, the strategist, the commander. The world of corporate warfare was one she knew intimately. Only this time, the objective was not profit. It was justice. She opened her laptop. She plugged in the USB drive. It contained everything: the unredacted geological surveys, the chemical analysis, copies of emails Julian thought he had deleted. Elena had been as thorough in her data collection as she had been in her science. Elara began to work. She constructed a timeline, a web of evidence. She wrote emails in precise coded language to Anya, her loyal soldier in the city. Anya was to secure certain servers, prepare legal documents, and schedule an emergency meeting of the Ethel Corp Board of Directors. The reason given was a hostile takeover attempt. In a way, it was the truth. For 2 days she and Caleb worked. He sat with her, explaining the science, translating Elena's technical notes into language a board of directors would understand. He spoke of his wife, not with sadness, but with a fierce, quiet pride. He was giving voice to her work, completing her last mission. In those 2 days, the wall between them began to dissolve. Elara saw the man beneath the stoic exterior. She saw the patient father teaching his daughter how to identify constellations in the night sky. She saw the skilled craftsman whose hands could fix anything. She saw the brilliant mind that had walked away from a world of wealth and power to build a small, meaningful life on a piece of land his wife had loved. She, in turn, began to shed her corporate armor. She ate dinner at their table. Simple meals made from vegetables grown in their garden. Lily, the perceptive child, began to treat her not as a visitor, but as a fixture. One afternoon, Lily came into the cabin and silently placed a small, smooth stone on Elara's laptop. A perfect gray oval. A talisman. Elara found herself talking about her father. Not the CEO, but the man. The man who had taught her to play chess, who had loved sailing, who had grown quieter and more distant as his company grew larger and more rapacious. She was beginning to understand his final letter. It was not just a confession. It was a plea for her to choose a different path. The morning of the board meeting, Elara dressed in her familiar uniform, a dark, impeccably tailored suit. But it felt different now. It felt like a costume. Caleb was going with her. He wore a simple, clean shirt and jeans. He was not dressing for their world. He was bringing his world into theirs. A silent witness, a moral anchor. Lily was staying with Martha. As they were about to leave, the little girl ran up to Elara and hugged her legs. It was a fierce, sudden embrace. "Be careful," she whispered. Elara knelt down. "I will," she promised. She felt a protective instinct, so strong it startled her. The company jet felt like a sterile cage. The flight to New York was silent. Caleb looked out the window, his face unreadable. Elara reviewed her notes, her mind a cold, clear machine. She was ready. The Ethel Corp boardroom was on the 80th floor. It was a cathedral of glass and steel, overlooking the city. The members of the board, men and women she had known for years, were already assembled. They were sharks sensing blood in the water. Julian Croft sat at the head of the table in her father's chair. He looked confident, smug. He believed he had already won. He gave her a condescending smile. "Elara, so glad you could make it. We were just discussing the future of the company, a more aggressive future." Elara walked to the podium. Caleb stood near the door. A quiet, immovable object in this room of restless ambition. His presence was a silent judgment on them all. "Good morning," Elara began, her voice calm, resonant. "I have not called this meeting to discuss a hostile takeover. I have called it to prevent one. A takeover that has been happening from within our own company for the past 5 years." She clicked a button. The large screen behind her lit up. It was a picture of Elena Thorne, a smiling, vibrant woman standing by a creek. This was Elena Thorne, she said. She was a scientist, and she was murdered to protect an Ethel Corp project. A murmur went through the room. Julian's smile tightened. "This is absurd," he scoffed. "A desperate, emotional play." Elara ignored him. She began to lay out the evidence. Piece by piece, she did not use emotion. She used data. She projected Elena's water table analysis. She showed the fraudulent geological surveys commissioned by Julian. She displayed financial models, not of profit, but of the catastrophic liability the company would face from the inevitable environmental disaster. Lawsuits in the billions, a brand damaged beyond repair. Then she played a recording. A phone call Elena had recorded. Julian's voice, smooth and menacing, offering her a consulting fee to invalidate her own findings. When she refused, his tone shifted. It would be a shame if such a promising career was cut short by a tragic accident. The boardroom was silent. Every eye was on Julian. The color had drained from his face. His corporate mask had shattered. Finally, Elara displayed the last piece of evidence. Bank records uncovered by Anya. A series of payments from a shell corporation controlled by Julian to a man with a criminal record for vehicular manslaughter. The payment was dated the day after Elena's death. "It's over, Julian," Elara said, her voice quiet but final. He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked around the table, seeking an ally, a friendly face. He found none. The sharks had turned on him. 2 uniformed police officers and 2 federal agents entered the room. Anya had timed it perfectly. They walked directly to Julian. He did not resist. His arrogance had crumbled into a gray, hollow shock. As they led him away, Elara addressed the stun board. "My first act as the continuing CEO of this company is to announce the termination of the Stone Creek project. The land will be donated to a conservation trust. To be managed by the state, it will be named the Elena Thorne Preserve." Her second act was to announce the formation of the Thorne Foundation, endowed with 10% of her own personal shares in the company. Its mission would be to fund independent environmental research, ensuring that no other scientist would have to fight this battle alone. It was a complete reversal, a repudiation of the company's rapacious past. It was the beginning of something new, something her father would have been proud of. When it was over, she walked over to Caleb. He had not moved. He had watched the entire proceeding with his quiet, steady gaze. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw the full weight of 5 years of grief begin to lift from his shoulders. "Thank you," he said. The 2 words held more meaning than any speech. She simply nodded. "Let's go home." The word hung in the air between them. Home. It was a place she had not truly had in a very long time. In the weeks that followed, Elara dismantled her old life with the same efficiency she had once used to build it. She tendered her resignation to the board, appointing a successor she trusted to carry on her new vision for the company. She sold the penthouse in the sky, with its panoramic views of a world she no longer belonged to. She liquidated assets, untangling herself from the complex web of investments and holdings that had defined her. With each sale, with each signature, she felt lighter. The armor she had worn for so long was heavy. She had not realized it until she began to take it off. One cool autumn morning, she packed the last of her belongings into a simple, practical truck. It was not new or flashy. It was a vehicle designed for function, not status. It felt right. She drove away from the city without a backward glance. The skyline receded in her rearview mirror, a collection of glass monuments to an ambition she no longer felt. The road ahead was open, leading her back to the rolling hills and quiet woods of Stone Creek. When she pulled into Caleb's driveway, he was on the porch, sanding the small wooden chair he had been mending on her first day there. He looked up as she approached, his hands stilling. He was not surprised to see her. It felt less like an arrival and more like a return. Lily came running from the house, a blur of motion and bright energy. She didn't say a word. She just wrapped her arms around Elara's legs in a fierce, welcoming hug. Elara rested her hand on the child's head, a simple, grounding gesture. Caleb walked over. His eyes held a question, but he did not ask it aloud. He did not need to. "I thought I might stay," Elara said, "if that's all right." He gave a slow nod. "The guest cabin is yours for as long as you need it." The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Elara learned the cadence of a life dictated by the sun and the seasons, not by a digital calendar. She learned how to mend a fence, how to plant a garden, how to split firewood. Her hands, once soft and accustomed to the smooth glass of a phone screen, grew calloused and capable. She shed the last remnants of the urban CEO. The suits were replaced by jeans, the heels by sturdy boots. She found a quiet satisfaction in physical labor, in the tangible results of a day's work, building something real, something that would last. She spent hours with Lily, exploring the woods and the creek. The child was a natural teacher, showing her how to identify birds by their song, how to find wild blackberries, how to read the stories told by animal tracks in the mud. Through Lily's eyes, Elara began to see the land not as a collection of resources, but as a living, breathing entity. Her relationship with Caleb unfolded with the same slow, deliberate pace as the land itself. It was a connection built not on grand declarations, but on small, shared moments. A cup of coffee passed between them in the cool morning air, a shared look of understanding across the dinner table, the comfortable silence of two people working side by side on a shared task. He taught her about woodworking, showing her how to feel the grain of the wood, how to respect the material. She, in turn, helped him set up the finances for the Thorn Foundation, her sharp business acumen now repurposed for a cause she believed in. They were two competent people from different worlds, finding a common language in their shared values. One evening late in the fall, they walked the fence line together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and fallen leaves. Lily ran ahead, chasing fireflies. Caleb stopped to check the tension on a strand of wire. He showed her how to do it, his voice low and patient. "Your turn," he said. Elara reached for the wire. Her hand brushed against his. It was the first time they had touched, a brief accidental contact that sent a current of warmth through her. It was not a spark of passion, but a slow, deep hum of connection. A recognition. She looked up at him. In the fading light, the guardedness in his eyes was gone. In its place was a quiet, steady warmth, a look of peace, a look of home. He didn't pull his hand away. He let it rest there, near hers. A silent acknowledgement of the space that had closed between them. She smiled. A real smile, not the polite, practiced expression she had worn for years. This one was small, genuine, and it reached her eyes. Some fences mark where land ends, others mark where it begins.